Will be in English. It's now day 2, session 2 of the Next Economy Open Conference, streamed live from Hochschule Fresenius in Cologne, in the well-known media park. And I am now introducing two colleagues. First, a former colleague. We first met at Karlsruhe International University, Desmond, and on my other side, Mihir Nayak. He has shortly been appointed professor here at Hochschule Fresenius, at the Business School of Hochschule Fresenius. And as you can see, we are entering the age of Asia. You were born in Goa, India.
Correct.
You were born in Singapore. And yes, I think, Mihir, you start and introduce yourself briefly, and we will talk about tourism, about the future of tourism, and about the challenges tourism faces today.
Perfect. My name is Professor Mihir Nayak. As you rightly mentioned, I got the professorship recently for hotel and tourism management. So I come from a hotel background with a tourism background as well. And one of the subjects that I teach here, one of the subjects that excites me also the most is sustainable mobility management. So the whole sustainability aspect, and I see especially in the past 2 years, maybe 1.5 years, I think especially thanks to Greta Thunberg, we are seeing a change in tourism towards more sustainable tourism. I was at the World Travel Mart recently in November, and a surprising amount of topics were about the sustainability aspect of tourism and how we cannot continue like this for much longer. So that's I think a very interesting topic that we can focus on.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me here. My name is Desmond, originally from Singapore. I now teach at the Cologne Business School, and it's very nice to have these kinds of dialogues to talk about some very important events. And what is the future of tourism? I mean, we know that tourism is the biggest market on the planet. There's most number of mobility through tourism, and obviously this has its impacts. Now, what we are doing now is we start to speculate what the future holds, and as you rightly say, in terms of sustainability, which I think is the core aspect, but also in other areas like digitalization and other forms of mobilities, even ideas of refugees, for example, that is a kind of mobility as well. So there are many, many issues to contend with. And this is in the light of changing political structures, social structures. So I think this is a very important topic. And I think it would be interesting to discuss further how we can actually zoom in on some key topics in this discussion and see how we can maybe develop this a bit further. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay, so I should briefly introduce my relation to tourism. There are two. I created and taught a module, Change and Innovation, in the tourism program in Karlsruhe, which I really liked to teach. Love to teach. And the other thing is I'm a little bit in tourism, not directly, but I've a, so to say, a second home in a tourist spot in close to the North Sea. And so I see many of the effects tourism has. Yeah. So even this area, this little island, Borkum, is living from tourism. The people really seem to feel stressed by over-tourism. These huge masses in summer. And if it's even worse when you look at Venice, for example, when you see this big cruising ships arriving there, thousands of people released from the ships, and here you have this combination of a social impact of tourism on one hand, on the other hand also the ecological impact on tourism. So what do you think? Will we continue like we do? We talked about the age of Asia, and we see a growing middle class in Asia, people that want to travel and people that do travel. You know, currently the Christmas markets here in Cologne, I think we have 25 Christmas markets and the buses coming in, and can we afford this from a planetary perspective?
I think as you rightly mentioned, especially in Asia, and where we're seeing that with our friends, we're seeing that with our families and close relatives. Suddenly, the Asians have the money, the monetary power to actually travel, and of course, they want to. This is something that I was talking to my students about this topic in Germany and in Europe. I think travel seems to be like a human right. And I think that the Asians are rightfully discovering, hey, that's our human right too. We also want to travel. We also want to see these places that we've seen in the movies. Salzburg, I know, Sound of Music. I lived there for about 10, 12 years, and there we saw that the Asian tourists, they wanted to see what they've been seeing on television, what they couldn't afford before. They suddenly want to come and see it now. On the other hand, the locals in the destination are saying, hang on a minute, these tourist hotspots that you have, we cannot have all the tourists from Asia, from China, from India. What happens if 1.3 billion and 1.3 billion people suddenly all decide to come to Salzburg at some point in their lives? What is going to happen then?
Good. Yes, I totally agree with your point on over-tourism. But I think it's also important to take a step back. Now, we have basically Europe here is the most visited place on the planet. It is clear in the last years, decade. And then you also have the outgoing tourism, basically coming out from Asia. So as rightly, so you pointed out, the Asians in Europe is basically the critical mass we're looking at. So we always have examples here in Europe. You can talk about Venice, you can talk about Barcelona, even Berlin, how the local communities are dealing with this influx of people. But the influx of people have always been there. People have always been moving. If you look at where I come from in Singapore, it's an island. There are 5 million people there, and the tourists, you cannot imagine how crowded it is on Orchard Road. But there's no mention of over-tourism. Now, is it because people there don't care? They're not environmentally conscious? Or is it because the social infrastructure there and the way people assimilate this idea of modern economies, globalization, this is something that people that are used to. So it's not about the masses. Suddenly it becomes something more, there's a quality aspect to it. What we understand as quality of life, maybe. What do we understand as a European way of life? And what we understand as our private spaces that we want to cherish, who are our community. So I think we're asking very deep questions, and we need to just relook at over-tourism itself and people like Ko Koons and all these people in NHTV Breda, for example. They have a team working on specifically some of these issues. How do we proceed knowing that this is happening in Europe? And here you actually see the resistance. The local communities are voicing out. There's a film made in Venice, for example. Barcelona, but the Benedict Principe is actually a film made in Germany, a documentary by Tischler, basically about how the tourists are basically sinking the city. You can't even find toilets to go to. So this is an important event. And the solutions we have, what are solutions? Is it to prevent the tourists, which is one, or is it to charge different kinds of taxes? So for example, in Barcelona, they impose an admission fee to Park Güell, which is ridiculous because right now what's happening is the locals are being charged to go into Park Güell when it has been free all along. So it's creating even more resentment. So I think what's important to think about is, what is over-tourism specifically relating to the place? So we need to understand the infrastructure of place and the culture of that place, and then build in all the different stakeholders to analyze it as if it was totally a planet on its own, without having a kind of a specific model on how to work with. And I think maybe this is somewhere we can come from this angle to relook at some of these spaces.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. In fact, as you were talking, I by chance I read today on the CNN app that in Rome, the mayor and the politicians want to cover this famous fountain. I think it's the Fontana di Trevi. They want to cover it completely with barricades so that nobody even gets close to it. because he's saying otherwise now we have to keep policemen there who every time somebody puts a foot into the water, you have to tell them no, don't do that. They had some Australian tourists who poured beer in there. Some people who wanted to jump in, and I don't know. I wonder really whether this was a problem before, because I think there was a mention of a movie in the 60s with two actors I don't know from Bollywood who were dancing in the fountain. And that was something, that was before my time, but that was something that was seen, as something good, something positive. Today, you would never encourage somebody to do that in a movie. So I think we are moving, far beyond what people were traveling before and how they used to look at it. If one person did it, it's okay. Now, if 100 people are doing it, suddenly it doesn't. It's not okay anymore.
Yes, and this is something I'm thinking about. Should we, or should you are the tourist experts, shouldn't we develop new ways of tourism, which is, so to say, tourism in your hometown, we talked about that, and tourism in your vicinity, create new tourist spots nearby. There's so many places here around Cologne that could be tourist spots, but they aren't. So is there a way to level tourism in one way or the other?
That is, as you were talking about that, and we spoke before this session about the social aspect of it. What happens if suddenly people from Europe and from Asia and from Africa suddenly don't move to each other's countries because of over tourism? What negative social impact will that have when you don't interact with people from other countries and cultures? You only interact with local people. You don't fly anywhere.
No weak ties anymore.
Exactly, and you don't have, and then suddenly I don't know somebody from another country. I've never met them. They seem to. I don't know. You do a lot of work on the social aspect of tourism. What do you think would happen if, because of this flight shame or Flugskam, for example, we stop flying completely and totally break out these ties?
Yes, I think it's a very important point you're mentioning. I mean, it's very simple. If you look at a very simple example here in Köln, for example, in Cologne is a really, really exciting city. And it's one thing special here is people pride on the identity as koshes. It's a very, very strong identity. What is fatal? No? But how do you sell this to the tourists? The tourists don't understand what fatal is. You need to build this concept up. Of course, people are very friendly, but this is not really a tourist product. We need to incorporate this with the tourists. And so the moment you arrive, your first checkpoint is really the train station. From any of the airports you arrive, it's always a train station. How do you accommodate the tourists from the train station? Do we have enough facilities? Not around. Forget the tourist attractions. Let's start from the train station. For example, the toilets. I let toilet facilities for the tourists after they disembark from the train. And tourists have to pay for these toilets. And there are 3, all of which you have to pay for, and it goes up to 150, and it depends whether it's even available. So how do we accommodate tourists and show a kind of hospitality that might be important? It's not just about the attractions, it's how do people feel comfortable in this within the spaces of the city. So feeling local. And I kind of like this idea from Denmark. They have a campaign. It's called the end of tourism. Funny, we're talking about the future of tourism. They say it's the end of tourism. And why is it the end of tourism? Because they have something called localhood. So what they're saying is, wait a minute, tourists come, they're not tourists. They are part of locals. So they don't have a fatal concept. They say, no, you're not a tourist, you're local. And so they incorporate the tourists within the spaces of the local. They call it localities. And they have an entire write-up, a very, very nice write-up on what this actually means, the end of tourism. And that's very powerful as a tool to not say, Copenhagen is a place for, you can go to the Little Mermaid. They say, no, you are part of us. We are together in this as one. And that really stands out. So you are engaged in the community. So this is an example that I can think of, which is very nice. But in Germany itself, another example is, you're going back to Bochum and the islands. I mean, the Wadensee is a UNESCO World Heritage site. It's been there for a while. Now they've recently incorporated the neighboring countries as well. So they are collectively a part of 3 countries now. Denmark, Netherlands, and Germany. And this is a really best case study approach, because you can see, in a way, yes, there's tourism, but it is controlled in a way. They're doing it in a way that is pretty much controlled. We have to see what happens in the future. But I would say this is one of those cases, I think, in Germany that I'm really happy to see is going in a very nice way. And we need to study and learn from places like Waddenzee, Wattenmeer, no? The Dutch Waddenzee, yeah, that's why I'm Wattenmeer in German. So I'm always confused because I studied Dutch before German. But this idea of how it works.
My mother was Dutch. I'm also confused.
Maybe you need Danish as well, just to
Confuse you more.
But I think this is a very good example of how we can move forward with this idea of localhood and maybe sustainability.
No, but talking about localhood, isn't that what Airbnb is all about? I mean, we were just talking before, you're the expert on Airbnb, expert consumer on Airbnb. When I traveled to London for the World Travel Mart conference, I didn't stay in a hotel. I stayed in an Airbnb, and I actually got to discover a part of London that I normally would never have discovered because there are no hotels there. It's not a touristy area. I was just like one of the locals. I went and shopped at the market as one of the locals. I took the bus like one of the locals, and I actually felt part of this neighborhood.
But you're also part of the gentrification.
That's another point. This person who rented the apartment to me, I think he still normally lives there. So it's not completely, like this second home that you rent out to Airbnb people. But the kind of local interaction that I got there with the people was really unique. On the other hand, that's one apartment that is not available to the locals to rent for themselves.
Yes.
So how do you balance that out? On the one hand, we want tourists to be like locals. On the other hand, we're saying, actually, hang on, maybe we don't want you to be like a local because we are the locals here, and we need to have preference there.
Yes. And why do you send the tourists to Cologne and not to Rösrath, for example?
What's in Rösrath?
This is village close
Okay.
by. Okay. Yeah, but what I mean is that's what I mean by leveling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there, of course, the people from Asia see the dome, the cathedral, they see the castle of Neuschwanstein in Bavaria, and so on, and that's what they want to see because they've seen it in the movies or wherever. Hofbräuhaus, of course, yes. And that's what they want to see. But how can we open the space to the area around? And there might be hundreds of tourism spots for both for locals and for internationals. And I think this would be a task for guys like you working in the tourism industry to push this idea, to avoid the problems we see with over-tourism.
You're talking about, in a way, redistribution, which is, I think, very important. On one hand, I think this model works in Germany because we have the spaces and we can kind of navigate around these spaces. For example, a place that I find fascinating that's not been talked about enough for international tourism is the Märchenstraße. The fairy tale street. We basically have, it's basically all the towns that link the Grimm brothers. And all the different stories that the children grew up with, including myself. I grew up with some of these stories. You see the website, but there's not much done about these fantastic stories. And this is really putting people out in the nature, understanding stories, and a way of redistribution. But yet, on the other hand, I think it's important to be careful because in Iceland, for example, as you know what's happening in Reykjavik, there's over-tourism, hardcore over-tourism in Reykjavik. Now, their solution is to basically work on redistribution, meaning for them is building more airports and creating greater accessibility to other areas in Iceland. So on one hand, you can say, okay, this is great, it's diverting the traffic. But on the other hand, in a place with really pristine ecosystems, how does that really affect the environment when you work on a distribution policy? So this is something that we need to be quite careful about, and I think like people like us, we need to really go in and really to work on kind of assessment, feasibility studies to look at what works and what could not work in sustainable ways. Airbnb, as you rightly brought up, is a very contentious issue because this year is, I think it's 12th year, 11th and 12th year in making. They just celebrated at 10 years of Airbnb. But Airbnb is always difficult because the original intention is to try to flatten, to level the structure. But what it has done actually right now is the opposite. They have problems with taxation of basically restricting spaces for all these for businesses, and the students and the locals suffer as a result from that. So again, Airbnb has now become a bad word. And at least in the big cities, again, where we're talking about over-tourism, it is pretty much always linked to Airbnb. So how do we, again, maybe diffuse the structure of what it means to be local, to get people moving about, looking at different places in sustainable ways, I think, and maybe looking at smaller places, Leverkusen maybe, or the Ruhrgebiet. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of exciting things there. Maybe this could be interesting. I mean, it doesn't also have to be attractions. It could be also festivals that you could create. Another example is food festivals, for example. Food festivals work. You can get a lot of different communities coming to celebrate some of these in sustainable ways. It's an event, but you can do it really, environmentally friendly. So.
Do you agree?
Absolutely. He was talking about food festivals. On my street in Cologne, we have the Körnerstraßen Fest, and that is actually all those items are actually prepared by people who live on the street. And now if you have a tourist that comes there, okay, he's actually, you're not, the locals are not going to get rich by that. It's a very small amount, but at least you can see the money is going directly to them. Food that is prepared by the locals, the way the locals eat it, rather than some restaurant that gives you a fake sort of authenticity. Here you're getting authentic food there, and the money is going directly to the locals as well.
Oh, that's a pretty good idea. Yeah, and to make this more public, to let people know also from abroad that something like this is happening. Yeah, that would be quite interesting. The other thing might be, so currently we have media, digital media, TV, whatever, and you see Cologne on some Netflix series or whatever is happening. And this attracts more people. And could digitalization not help us to give the people more experience at home with less traveling? What do you think?
That's a very difficult topic. I don't. Chris, who's a professor here, Chris Vikkanen is a good friend of mine. But whenever he talks about VR and virtual reality replacing tourism, I don't like the direction that's going, because of course I don't know. I am actually afraid that in tourism, virtual reality will become so good that the tourists then say, listen, I don't need to go to Cologne. I just put on the headset. I see the Kölner Dome. I look at it from the bottom. I look at it in the moonlight, and I don't need to. So I've ticked that off, and I don't need to travel there. I don't need to travel there as well. In the short term, yes. In the long term, if everybody starts doing that, then suddenly why do I need to go to Cologne? It has only this one cathedral.
Isn't it sustainable?
If everybody does it?
Yeah, isn't it sustainable? We actually limit tourist numbers. So that would be the sustainable alternative to Venice and Barcelona, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and you won't tax it. Yeah, and that's obviously the worst social thing is taxing tourism. Yeah, because there are other taxes. I really like taxes because in Germany we say steuern, which means steer. They can steer, but there are always problematic social aspects behind this. And when you have to pay to go to the beach or to a park or whatever, this is not social. No? Yeah. Because this commercializes everything at the end of the day. Yeah.
And even within the payments, you have different separation of who pays what. You have a differentiation of price.
Yes, yes.
Some beaches are restricted to locals. Some places are restricted only to the hotel guests. So you also have zones,
Yes.
which is scary sometimes.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And I think the worst thing for me is when I have to go to the beach and when I go to the beach and I have to pay for it, like in Sylt. Yeah, Sylt is no island, but yes. So it means it's a very special world, which even is contradictory to our traditional laws, like in the north in Friesland, in the Frisian area, we have this every man's law, jedermannsrecht, yeah. And this contradicts this basic cultural principle, yeah, and I think this is a very bad idea.
Yes. I was actually on the beach in about 4 years ago on the Italian Riviera, and I actually saw this Union Jack flags hanging there in Italy, and I was like, whoa, what is this all about? And so me, with my background in anthropology, I said, no, I had to investigate. So instead of enjoying my holiday, I started talking to people, and what I realized was these banus on the beach, they basically are cafes, restaurants that extend right onto the beach. A lot of paparazzi, a lot of Italian movie stars on the beach. And what happened was the government actually tried to reclaim the space because these barrios actually own the beach in front of them. So now, and then the public can only use small segments of beach along this. So the idea was to actually free up the beaches to make it public. But there was a resistance because these people have owned that part of the beach for the last 80 years. Why should we change that? And so they put up the Union Jack because it was Brexit. To say we can also do it to support Brexit. So you can see some of what we're talking about is highly politicized as well, and it's not so easy to break away from this aspect. And how does this idea of the political go back into the idea? And I go back to John Orry's tourist gaze. He wrote this in 1990s. Going back to this idea of digitalization, can we, if the ultimate tourist gaze is the beach? If you Google tourism, within the first 3 images, you will get the beach. This is the iconotype of tourism. Can we then, with our AR or VR, conceptualize this beach, or to not go to the beach and just experience it vicariously? Is this really possible? I don't know. And I'm like you, I really want to experience, and we're talking also at the same time in tourism about experience of place. At the same time, we're talking about digital technologies and how this could actually augment place. So we seem to be struggling with these two concepts at the same time.
Augment is okay. If it replaces it, then, for example, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the Mona Lisa. Is it? I mean, everybody says, okay, the Mona Lisa you have to see once in your lifetime. We went as a family when we were in Paris. We stood there and we saw we saw the Mona Lisa. We waited for a really long time. What if it suddenly becomes okay just to see it via virtual reality and never to visit the Louvre because of that? Are we losing out on something there?
Can you be sure that this is the real, true Mona Lisa?
No.
No.
Have you been to the Louvre?
Yes.
Have you seen what it's like to see the Mona Lisa in front of the barricades?
It wasn't so bad when we went. It was about 12 years ago. There were no selfie sticks. And I actually got maybe this close to it. I looked, we had to still move quickly. So he said, come on, keep moving after 5 seconds. But I was actually able to stand here and see it. I don't know. I think that's part of, or certain places that's part of tourism. That's also so tourism also is an inherent part of your life. Yeah. Have you really lived if you haven't seen the Mona Lisa? Have you really lived if you haven't been to New York?
I totally agree on that, but Mona Lisa is a bit contentious, and the reason why is, going back to what Walter Benjamin was talking about. He talked about the aura, the sense of the aura. To what extent can we reproduce this image? And when we actually reproduce the image, does the aura, is that also replicated in a sense? Can we actually do that? So what is the authenticity in front of the Mona Lisa versus the Mona Lisa that we already know since we grew up? that image has already been in our head. We have seen the Mona Lisa before
Yes.
the Louvre.
Yes.
We have seen it about 1,000,000 times in our head
Yes.
in all possible
Yes.
combinations. So how do we extrapolate that as truth? What is the truth? That imagination that we see, or the disappointment we get after queuing up and pushing,
Yes,
and
yes.
at the end, and to say, this is a total disappointment. So what does that have to do for tourism? Because now my truth is totally distorted, you know, and this distortion is really what our take home. What at the end is all about, you know, based on this mega distortion. I don't even need VR or AR for this because my imagination is already fixed.
But when you actually have the chance to go there, okay, take another example, New York, to actually walk down Manhattan. That was on my bucket list for many years. I said, you know, before I die, I have to do this. And then I said, okay, why should I wait until I'm close to death to do it? Let me. So I gifted myself a trip to New York for my birthday. Actually walking through downtown Manhattan, and this is what our students tell us, because in tourism, for example, we have a one semester abroad where Hochschule Fresenius students get to travel and then spend 6 months in New York, and they say just walking down this Manhattan street and then looking up, my neck, my head never looked down, my eyes, my gaze never looked down. I was always looking up at all the buildings, and that sense of wonderment, I think is absolutely unique, and also part and parcel of tourism.
Coming back, we have on Friday we have another Friday for Future, and tourism. I take two examples: the beach, the Waddenzee, the Dutch word, is is extremely in danger. Yeah, maybe we will not have it in 30, 40, 50 years. The same the Alps, Switzerland, the glaciers, for example. Will it be possible to go skiing? Too much snow, not enough snow. There's no middle. Yeah, like on the North Sea. I used to go sailing for several years, and it's like you have too much wind or not enough wind. Yeah, and it has been different 20 years ago. Yeah, and the question is, does tourism, or will tourism have to change? For example, will the Swiss build skiing halls in the mountains? Yeah, or do we build some artificial beach along the North Sea, or build it in Cologne, or whatever? Where will it go? What do you think?
Well, you gave some difficult examples. I mean, in Switzerland, you know, we're talking about kind of sustainable tourism. That tourism, for the sake, is not just tourism that has to be sustainable. It is tourism that uses sustainability. How do we go there to really engage the use of place? Now, Switzerland is a bit difficult because when you mention the Alps, I'm thinking of Bollywood. Now, Yash Chopra, you would know this better than me, was basically a fan of Switzerland. He basically embodied the idea of the Alps and the romantic images of the mountains into Bollywood.
Yeah.
And so now you get all these Indian tourists, the Bollywood tourists, going to Switzerland to look at and embrace this sense of place. Now, this, of course, is right now a bit another iffy issue. How do we deal with this, you know, with the influx of Indian tourists? But on the other hand, we can also think of maybe how Bollywood could maybe add to this sense of sustainability within, in the way of protecting the Alps. A lot of it is also due to climate change, which we cannot really prevent. But I think there are certain things, at least in terms of the tourist behavior, that we can kind of work on, and maybe we can think of something to the extent how Bollywood tourism could maybe work in that direction, with the truckloads of people coming to see Shah Rukh Khan's statue in is Ingolstadt, probably, yeah.
We need to. I think what you were talking about. You mentioned Uri and his tourist gaze. I think we need to change that tourist gaze, like you said, maybe through media such as Bollywood, through these films, to show maybe that there is I don't know, maybe Rosrat, you said, is really beautiful, or other areas, and maybe to be a bit more diverse, rather than saying every movie we're going to shoot in this location so that everybody comes to Switzerland. No, maybe there are other parts, other countries in Europe, other places elsewhere that you can also promote through the image of media and film.
By the way, I'm not sure if I've ever been in Rösrath. I don't know.
Oh, look what you're doing now.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Might be a good idea.
It's a good idea. We should do this more
Our next meeting will be in Rösrath. Okay. Yes. Maybe you can both tell a little bit about where do you think your personal research will be going in the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever.
I think it's very nice you mentioned John Ori just now again, so we're going back to him. I've always liked his work. I managed to speak to him before he passed away some years ago. So, it's very, very nice man. And everyone has always jumped on, including myself, from John Ori's work, Tourist Gaze, to say, look, hang on, it's a lot more embodied. John Ori, you're too semiotic. You're too representational. Tourists want to feel things. So they say, let's go beyond that. So they talked about Tourist Gaze 3.0 with Jonas Larsen.
Yeah.
And now I'm inclined to go back to the original idea of John Ori's regulation of the gaze. And the reason why I do that is because of digitalization. Going back to the earlier topic, how we are informed through social media, through Instagram, how to see. So it's no longer tourism marketing, DMOs doing the job. A lot of young people are now snapping away, and influencers are just going to a place, and other people who follow the influencers are just informed and reproduce the exact images in place. So we're looking at a new form of reproduction. And that reproduction is becoming very interesting for me with a new look at an old tourist gaze. So John Ori, I would say, has now become, for me, he was way ahead of his time when you talk about digitalization processes. And an example of this is I'm working on this project now in Hallstatt. You might notice I basically showed a picture of Hallstatt. It's just a cathedral, beautiful village. And I showed it to my students, and none of my students knew where this was. All the Erasmus students, I have 12, and Germans in there, nobody knew. And then 2 Chinese students at the back of the class, they put up their hands and said, this is obviously Hallstatt, Austria. I was like, how did these Chinese students know this? And so I realized then the fact that these Chinese students knew what Hallstatt was, and for them it was the most beautiful place in Europe, suddenly transformed my ideas of tourist gaze. So it is basically who is the tourist? Who is looking, and this who is looking transforms how we understand what tourism could be. And especially now with the Chinese markets really expanding, and Europe is set to receive Asian tourism, this is my next step to see, wait a minute, hang on, how do these new ways of gazing actually inform how we manage tourism? So.
Just one question. I was just thinking about Heidelberg. The buses coming in, and the people are having 4 days or 5 days, and going from Munich to Hamburg, and it's a process industry from my point of view. It's just process. Bring the people to the Chinese shops in Heidelberg, to Chinese restaurant, put them back on the bus, and so on and so on. How can we change this from your point of view? Or is it exactly that what the Chinese expect, or is it something that they are set to do so?
Okay, so I'll answer this before I get to you.
Sure.
So what we do is, we have this saying in the back of our heads: the customer is always right. Yes, we have to cater to the customer. But if I cater to the Chinese markets, I would say, no, I'm not interested in offering you Chinese food if you go to Austria or Germany. I'm going to give you what the locals eat, whether you like it or not. And if not, don't come. So you will get to eat Rösti in Switzerland, or you get to eat Schweinehaxe here. I mean, this is basically what you can also say this is very touristy. But we will try to be as local as possible.
Absolutely.
So this is one way to navigate around it. Heidelberg is even not so bad. In Hallstatt, where I was talking about, they have 820 inhabitants and 1 million visitors a year. 2018, they had 1 million visitors. People just come in, they take the photograph, and they go.
That's it.
So even the usual way of trying to deal with this is to create more overnight stays. This is not solving the problem. I mean, it tries to marginalize certain, but it's not really solving the problem. So we need new ways, and this is, you have rightly pointed out, new ways to really rethink Heidelberg. What is it about Heidelberg? Using the spaces. Heidelberg is a bit different. You have the walking street, you have the shopping, which is always great for tourism, and you have the castle. And then you have the bridge across. Actually,
Like Salzburg.
like Salzburg,
Absolutely.
but there's also the Philosopher's Weg on the top. If you follow the bridge across up, it's not really sold. So the tourists end up on the bridge, they take the photographs, but they don't walk up the hill. So which is, again, a bit of a waste. So maybe we could work on small little pockets of space and say, wait a minute, hang on, maybe it's a nice stroll here, maybe it's a nice stroll there. So, you know, and then we could stand in Heidelberg and do some. So I think it works with the tour operators and the travel agencies. How do we really reposition this sense of place and not just cater for what the tourists want to see or what we expect them to want to see?
Yeah, speaking of further research, in fact, you hit upon a very interesting topic. That's also the area that I was looking through, the role of influencers, and of course, since it's nearly 12 o'clock, since it's nearly lunchtime, food. And the role of food there, as you mentioned, this authentic, trying this authentic sort of food that you get there. How can we use, and it is being worked slowly there. How can we use influencers, or what role do influencers play in actually encouraging food tourism? Because that's I think, according to me, one of the hottest new topics that is coming up now. Food tourism, people actually traveling. I also did a presentation on that at the ITB Berlin. People actually traveling for the sole reason of eating.
You both wrote or write a paper currently about tap water, which is quite interesting.
Absolutely. That was another topic. So you see our common interests are food and drinks, so food and beverage. But another topic, and that all, like you mentioned at the beginning, I think the point of coming back to the point of hospitality. I think food is an inherent part of hospitality. We wrote and we spoke about the value of offering free tap water to anybody who comes to a restaurant as a basic characteristic of hospitality. And I think that maybe in this discussion of over tourism, a lot of the basic concept of hospitality and what it means to be hospitable to tourists, I think, is being lost, and that's something that we definitely need to work against.
Okay, I think we are getting close to our deadline.
Intervention from Bernd Rützel. Rösrath is a very nice place. I live there.
I know.
We're going to visit his travel agency.
Yeah. Maybe he comes along with his Tesla and picks us up. Okay. Thanks both, Mihir.
Thank you so
Desmond.
much.
Yeah, so talking about food, we are going to have Schweinsachse in the Brauhaus soon again. And we have, I will eat salad and you will eat this unhealthy food.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. So we will discuss, we have lots of opportunities to discuss. And if somebody still has questions, please let us know. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for listening out there. And it was fun talking to you.
Absolutely.
Both guys.
Thank you so much.